Uh, So I want to welcome all of you to our Regen quarterly calls. Hey, Sonia, good to see you. Um, Mary Ellen Lynch is going to be our provocateur today. She's deeply embedded in her doctoral program looking at longevity and regeneration and is going to invite us to look at our systems holistically and what are the implications if we take a challenge like significant shifting dynamics like longevity um, and look at it through a regenerative lens. What are the different questions that we ask? Are there different things that we pay attention to as we kind of design and think our way into the future? I've known Mary Ellen for decades because she used to live in Minnesota and work in higher education. And so I connected with her way back when we were both in higher ed. And so I'm
And
really,
very young.
and very young, yes, young and foolish, and looking forward to her unique way of viewing, um, studying something and then bringing unique questions to it. So I will leave it to you, Mary Ellen.
Are you going to share the hosting so I can show my
Yep, you can do whatever you want. Sharing is
perfect?
already a permission. I've already given permission to share.
Thank you.
Mm,
So, what I'm hoping we can have a discussion about today, and I'll give you my perspective, and then we can offer opportunities to discuss and disagree and agree. I want to talk about what I see as the relationship between what my definition is of lifelong learning and how that incorporates and relates to and builds on regenerative leadership. Um, so I say it that way because I believe lifelong learning is a concept, but there is a strong interplay between societal change and the demographic changes and higher education. Uh, Nothing is happening in isolation. So today, I want to explore three questions. The first is the way that longevity is reshaping society and higher education is twofold. First of all, in the last 100 years, we've added almost 30 years to our lifespan. So that in and of itself has changed the way we live our lives. And yet, many of our institutions have not changed greatly. We have a lot more age diversity. Instead of having a pyramid for our population, we now have much more of a rectangle. And we have considered a much longer midlife. Um, so we have different needs now, and yet we have many of the same institutions that we had in the 1930s when, for example, Social Security was signed into law. Um, it was signed into law because people's bodies were worn out from agriculture and manufacturing. And
But we've got some sound coming from you. Can we mute your Kathy? As host, you should be able to mute.
yeah,
There we go. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Go ahead, Mary Ellen.
um, so we need to consider the why aspect of why longevity and higher education are particularly relevant to us on a daily basis. What's going on here? I believe that regenerative programs, concepts, and leadership are really an opportunity because we now have new design space to rethink what is needed, what's accessible, and how we can reshape higher education to bring about a sense of renewed purpose, contribution, innovation, and a sense of community, and not just consider the need for reskilling for a workforce that's aging rapidly. And I'm going to offer you some examples of some of the innovative opportunities that are being presented and developed. And I'm sure there are lots more out there. Every time I turn over an email, I'm surprised at what is becoming available as well. I just returned from a Longevity Innovations Conference in Arizona, which was the first of its kind offered in the United States. So there's a lot happening, and I hope we have time to talk about a lot of it. So this I borrowed from and was shared with by Laura Storm of Regenerative Leadership in the Regenerators community. And, you know, our discussion today is going to follow a journey that I was just talking about, exploration. And both in society and higher education, I think there are three significant questions we can ask. Where do we trust people to make decisions without a rigid process? And so I want you to think about that. I ask you to think about it because the second part to that is where do new ideas often die quickly in your experience and in your practice? Whether that be in corporate world or higher education or nonprofit. Where do they flourish? And then the third question is, where have we established processes for development, learning, and feedback? Um, and so as you look at this particular graphic from Laura, I was a part of the Regenerators program the year before last. And so there were a lot of things that we explored, including how relationships need to be rooted in trust. And that isn't solely a matter of you're a nice person, I'm sure you mean well, but rather deep trust for what it is we're trying to build and develop. And then what kind of coherence, and I'm going to use the Grand Strand where I live in South Carolina because we have a very strong over 50 population and expecting another 200,000 people to move here by 2035, the majority of which will be over 50. And so I was talking with the community liaison for the United Way, and I said, so, how do you foresee the infrastructure in Horry County handling these this many people, this much of an influx, this age? Because they
Quick
had
question,
just,
Mary Ellen. Can you click
uh-huh,
the slideshow button so we can see a bigger, closer up of your slides and read it
sure,
better? Thank you.
sure.
From current slide upper left. There you
Current
go.
slide, upper left.
Yeah, right there.
There you go. I'm so sorry.
Oh, and there it is.
Um,
Thank you.
so, Coastal Carolina University, where I'm a student, has had marine study programs going on for over 30 years, looking at the fact that South Carolina is basically a swamp. We sit on the ocean, and so we look at What about sewage into the ocean? That we're heavily reliant on vacationers coming here. And so, what's next when we're looking at a development a day? Um, and how do we address the fact that the communities here would like to attract families with children, but where are they coming from? Um, so, I think we need to take all those kinds of things into account, and that's why I asked her, do we have the infrastructure? And she said, we don't know. So, my point being, this again is an interplay where, we need to have society involved with government, involved with individuals, involved with groups, involved with higher education. And I find it absolutely amazing to think that no, we're not. And so, what does this look like as we consider that any living system is constantly sensing and responding to changes? And yet, I find that higher education is one of the most resistant areas to change in our society that is imaginable. And I find other areas of our society um, begging sometimes for help and wondering where they can possibly find those people with expertise to work together. When change is needed or systems are injured and we see that it often heals itself through a self-organized response. Maybe higher education just needs to get out of the way sometimes. I tend to think that makes a lot of sense to me. And when systems are faced with new external conditions, they can adapt, and they do, and then they develop new capacities over time. I think ultimately I'm enough of an optimist, and I believe deeply in our ability to regenerate and our need to regenerate that we will, and it will happen. I'd love to say I'm going to see it and be a part of it. But I think we have some things going on right now in this particular country that are tripping us up, obviously. Um, because the degree to which a living system is thriving and responsive very much depends on the quality of the relationships. And so I think that is rooted in a, a place-based community collaboration that is necessary for organizations to take effect with each other and to respect each other and to build that trust. Um, that kind of coherence and cohesion advances meaning and purpose. And I think we have the ability, but we also have to train our capacity to tune in not only to our own specific organization as a living system, but we also have to use that organization to create conditions so that we can thrive. Well, I'm trying. There we go. I think it's important to recognize that we are moving from a risk narrative. And again, I'm not sure always that we can verbalize this or discuss this or acknowledge that it's taking place. But I think we're moving into an opportunity frame. Um, it is an opportunity for us to recognize that all of this, the longevity, the age diversity, the workforce needs, are placing enormous stress on our systems. There are examples of corporate responses that started happening 20 years ago. And what I find interesting is the majority of the corporations creating change, even in the United States, are not United States corporations. They are European corporations. For example, L'Oreal has intentionally designed work teams of mixed generations because they don't want to lose their older workers to retirement. They want to continue reskilling and upskilling them as well as capitalizing on their experience to help mentor and train the younger people coming in. And they want to use that creativity and innovation that is notorious in the American corporate system and make it a better working environment. Um, and so BMW is looking for the same thing here, and they have a huge plant in South Carolina. Um, and I say this because it came up in a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I said to our provost and our dean of two different colleges, mouth opened, words came out, and I said, well, they're looking for guidance from a university to talk about the change in the workforce as well as reskilling and upskilling information. And they looked at me and they said, my goodness, they even used exactly those words. And I thought, wow, and that's coming from an old white woman. Can you imagine? And yes, I am sounding very skeptical, cynical, and sarcastic in some respects because I see such tremendous resistance within higher education to change. I see tremendous resistance to an older individual who actually um, shows signs of continued growth and development. And I'll get into that later too. So as we hit that demographic threshold, which I was talking about, that's changed so much, it's impacting workforce, healthcare, sense of community, all kinds of other social services. For example, the senior centers that we long thought were happy places for bingo, they don't want to play bingo anymore. This is the best educated, healthiest generation. This is also this older generation, obviously went through Vietnam, the feminist revolution, and the civil rights movement. They want to learn, they want to continue to learn. And the retirement models that are being presented to them are one of, do you have enough money to retire? Well, very few people, except the very wealthy, have enough money to retire because retirement now is 30 to 40 years long after the mandatory retirement of 65. We do not, when we talk about retirement, talk about what it is you're going to do with that extra 20 to 30 to 40 years. We talk about money, and that's all. And it's significant that we need to change that. So at the same time, I'm seeing more and more and more pop culture, magazine covers, articles in not mainstream, but articles in Forbes, articles in the Atlantic, lots and lots of them in the New York Times about what is longevity? What does this mean? And how is all of this changing? How are the expectations shifting from what I want and what I expect from society and what it is society is able to offer to us. So my maintenance is that a living system thrives because it senses this. It wants to share the information and to be able to adapt quickly. And sometimes I wonder how long it will take higher education, particularly, to be able to adapt. So this is the way we used to think about the three-stage life. It was 18 to 22, maybe 25, pushing it, was education. And then you worked and you had your family. And then boom, at 65, that was all done. And then you retired and you went to golf 7 days a week, or, you went to make stained glass figures for 25 years. I think that was because we didn't offer anything else. And now, with 100-year life, we're looking at people who, and higher education examples, who are offering continual opportunities to not only change a career, but to become an entrepreneur or a re-career as you approach the potential for retirement. So we are watching, for example, one individual I'm aware of was a litigation lawyer, and she went to a higher ed institution which has what are called a transition program, offered by, right now, they're starting to shift. But at this point, they've been offered for about 10 years by elite private institutions, charging lots of money for the programs. They're highly effective. And this individual, who had been a litigation lawyer, went to a transition program, and through the course of the program and discussions and walks on the beach and all those sorts of things, she realized she didn't want to be a litigation lawyer, but boy, did she love to bake. And so the program said, "So are you going to open a bakery?" And she said, "No, that's not the point. I don't want to manage a bakery or a business. I want to go in at 3 o'clock in the morning, make the croissants, and get out of there by 7:30 or 8 o'clock." And that's what she wanted to do. So I think we're looking not only at enrichment programs, though they're valuable and they contribute a great deal and develop creativity for people, but we're looking at ways that people can find a sense of purpose and then contribute meaning, and shape meaning within their life. And it's not that they necessarily want part-time work, but they also want the flexibility of being able to say, "I will come in and work at these times on these days." So we're looking at that need for resilience. We're looking at that need for adaptability and in a different way. So these are the areas that I think are really redefining lifelong learning. When we say lifelong learning, currently we're talking about, in a university, the College of Continuing Education. And a lot of those are changing now to stop being age segregated and instead integrate participants into the overall university. So when we look at things like health and longevity and economics and longevity, we're seeing topics come up such as, in health and longevity, active aging, chronic disease prevention, a whole lifespan of mental health. The way I ask the question is, what does a healthy 100-year lifespan look like?
Hmm.
What shapes that? How do we begin in pre-K and work through 85 years of life on a healthy basis. Coastal Carolina University, again, my example, has just opened the College of Health. And I asked that question, and they all just looked at me and they said, no one's ever asked a question like that. And I said, but that's where we are. That's who we are now. And lifelong learning means how do we live this way for a 100-year lifestyle? Um, Economics and longevity, financial security and retirement systems, what do they look like on a 100-year basis? How do we distribute co-generational wealth and transfer that? What's the business case that we can make for an age-inclusive workplace? What happens when we consider the economic impact of an aging population? Particularly, Daniel, again, it's if the older group has 70% of the wealth, but we being the corporate world, has been targeting the younger 50-year part of the lifespan. How are they going to continue with that corporate profit-making model? How do we incorporate not only social responsibility into the aging, but also ensure that we are presuming that those older individuals want to spend their money and continue that circulation and transfer of wealth. When I think of education and longevity, I think of things like what do different learning models look like? What does intergenerational mentorship, or I call it co-generational mentorship because co in Latin means together. How can we create digital literacy programs that are co-generational? We're not doing very well with that, by the way. And ensure that educational equity across the lifespan becomes easily accessible. Every program that I look at in community engagement targets the K-12. One of the focus of my dissertation is let's look at the psychological, social, and emotional growth of later adults re-engaging with higher education. We've never done that. Montessori stops at age 25. And many of our foundational educational theorists didn't go past the 40s at max. And so as we are acknowledging that 46 states have free tuition for adults 60 plus, how is it that we can create a sense of belonging, a sense of welcome, a sense of incorporation rather than segregated environments for all of those individuals in that age group? So my point is we have, and I prefer to call it co-generational, as I just said, rather than multi-generational, because I think co-generational carries an implication of an interplay, a reciprocity between 5 generations and conversation and discussion moving forward with that. So this is what I know at this particular point. We have waiting lists at most of these university-based retirement communities that are years long. There's that much interest in them. What I find daunting is they are extraordinarily expensive at this point because universities bluntly need to make money now, and they're relying more on business models. And we need to find a way to make those more accessible and more affordable. There are increasing numbers of mentoring programs being developed. I'm a part of developing an innovation program right now to enable our students on campus to work with people in the community along the Grand Strand to address some of our longevity needs and design initiatives, one of which is how do people who have aging parents, or how do aging parents who live alone or independently still access help on an exchange basis? I don't know how many of you are aware of, there's a new robot model based on AI that's being written about. And I have to remember the name of it, LEQ. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Of course, right now it's very early stages, but it's interactive and is able to live with people, turn it off, turn it on as needed. It alleviates some of that sense of isolation and or potential fear. And I think that's very innovative and very helpful. Again, these transition programs are very much supported, been around for 10 to 15 years. They're now beginning to move into public institutions. Uh, Co-generational scholar programs are another, I think, phenomenal idea of students in the traditionally aged groups teaching older individuals. Could be anything from music to, because that's one of the things that many older people express interest in learning, that they never had the opportunity to learn an instrument. And these younger students who are working on whether it be an undergraduate degree or particularly a master's degree in teaching can offer. I think we need to include these older adults in our belonging programs, which is a very impactful and important part of bringing older and younger students together. As I mentioned, we have free tuition programs. And I also talked, what my focus is on, why don't we know what it is that older adults experience? Why do we think they stopped growing and learning and developing and have just not even questioned that in all this time in education? And so that's my mixed methods study that will be my dissertation. So the people doing this, I'm fascinated with as well. It's again that co-generation, and it's the older to the younger and the younger to the older, and all together working on things and how we can partner on things and collaborate on things, as well as communities working and religious groups. Unfortunately or fortunately, maybe we're taking our time a little bit, but we're going very slowly, and the need is getting greater and more urgent. So that's why I think very much we're in a point of not so much about aging, but rather how do we regenerate who we are, how we function, and where we're going. And it's got to be together. It's got to be a co-generational effort.
So is that your provocative question for conversation? I love it.
Sure. Go for it.
Well, I've been thinking about and writing future blogs on, what shifts in a regenerative system. And
Mhm.
one of the things that shifts is that in an extractive economy, you're basically looking at consumerism and colonialism as something that holds the extractive economy together, the exploitive economy, because the consumerism means that your relationships fundamentally are transactional. We have a product to sell, you have an interest in buying it, example. And a colonial dynamic basically builds dependency, but not self-organization or active co-generational relationships. But in a regenerative economy, if we looked to nature to give us a hint, nature is actually a system built on relationships instead of a
Mhm.
system built on things.
Mhm.
So the thing that underpins a regenerative organization or community is that there is a caring and a sacredness in all of our relationships, which then creates this more open design space to be in relationship with each other in a different way. And so I love the question. I think the question is, if we are in an age of regeneration, then I believe all of this scales. So the question on an individual level is, how are we engaged in a regenerative design for our own life? And then what's that look like in a community? And what's that look like in an organization? And what's it look like in a nation or a global kind of energy? So I
I think of that
love the
as,
question.
yeah, and I think of that a lot as it's an inner health. Because what the inner health is drives it forward on an outer health. That's why I'm so fascinated with the amount of resistance on a societal level and within higher education. But when you talk to individuals, the whole dynamic changes.
Mm,
People individually are much more responsive. I'm fascinated by that.
mm. Well,
Obviously, I've been talking to tons and tons and tons of people about this, and everyone um, just gets excited and interested and is very encouraging. And then I watch a university collapse its College of Continuing Education because they want to focus on the 18 to 22 or 25-year-olds.
mm,
Well, it's not me, it's not my opinion. Too much data says, I can see you thinking, Kathy.
I have a
I love it.
question. Do you think this is something that's isolated to where you're living or in your part of the country? Because in Nebraska here, the University of Nebraska has an OLLI program that my wife's involved with, and I have we're not quite fully engaged in it because at the age I'm at, I'm transitioning from stage 4 in your graphic to stage 5. But
But
I absolutely see that, my wife and I have lost three of our parents. We have my mother's 90 years old, still doing pretty good, but she's, experiencing things that are into life type issues too. So as we get out of that caregiving, it frees us up some time to do more of the fifth stage um, activities and that sort of thing. And this thing seems to be growing in Nebraska here. It's encouraged by the university. It's not tied to their academics, but it is the alumni program, of course, is promoting it. So that is the transactional piece. They're trying to keep alums engaged with the university through this. and it's a learning and it's an entertainment and it's whatever you want it to be. They offer everything from travel trips to Zoom gatherings to gatherings in person across the state. And what you were describing, I think what we're doing here in Nebraska fits that pretty well. I just didn't know. I don't understand, or I don't know whether that's being offered across the U.S.
It is. It's at 126 universities, and I know Ollie well. I worked at one. Ollie calls itself the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute,
Yeah, right.
and yet, and I think it's a wonderful example because Ollie is a good, solid program. However, because it calls itself a lifelong learning program, it is not considered one by the longevity innovation group. When Ollie was developed in 2000, it reflected the society and the demographic need. However, it's age segregated, number one. So it's not open, and that becomes huge. It's considered an enrichment program. And as such, as I said, it's very necessary, it's very well done, and it's very liked by many, but it doesn't cover the entire spectrum of the lifespan, nor does it want to. Um, it's beginning to recognize that it's going to need to be a bit more inclusive rather than exclusive. And so they are beginning to take some steps to broaden their membership and ability to participate. I know I was questioned when I was working at an Ollie about people who were attending a program, and I was asked if I was aware that they obviously were not fitting into the age group, and I said, yeah, but I'm not asking. Um, if someone's interested, I frankly don't care. But I think the important thing is the Rhodes Scholar Program, the U3A, which is a French program, and Ollie are all considered very important because they did reflect, they all were developed right around the same time. They all did reflect our society needs then, but they are not thought about as lifelong learning because they are so age segregated. So that's the distinction in
Yeah.
many respects, as well as they're not for credit or even not for credit. And most of their programs, when I look at them, are not, they're more prompting creativity.
Mm.
And that's very necessary for brainwave patterns when we get into the really technical end of things. It's really important for older individuals. So I'm not scoffing or dismissing Ollie at all. I'm just saying the general literature does not consider them that way.
Mhm. Hmm.
Well, it's interesting because regenerative systems, uh, if you look at nature as the teacher here, um, consider things from an integrative, holistic, interdependent way. And you
Yep.
can only fully understand the system and whether it's designed to be regenerative or not if you look at the whole. So the segregation is kind of it's something that I think in the US culture specifically, I'm thinking about, is very parts oriented. And so if we were going to ask the deeper question, which is what does this look like? What does our lifespan look like individually or collectively if we used regeneration as our kind of end goal? What would it look like? And integration, co-generational, whatever, helps us see the whole. So that would be very interesting.
But I do think that there is purpose in helping people understand the three the three segmented life versus the five segmented life, because I know people, and here again, it's where I am in my life. Those that have not, that try to stick to that that initial three segmented retirement, they hit that last phase, and I find they don't live joyful lives for the most part.
Mm,
They've thought over the years that would be great to play golf every day, but they find when they get there that um, it doesn't work out that way. So moving to the five segmented section, if we can help people understand that there are other ways to utilize your skills and your experiences and that age, let's just call it 75 to 100, even though that's so forth. Maybe it's 80 to 100. I don't know. Definitely there's more people living to 100. We see it in our retirement communities here
mm,
quite often. And I do think those people that are active and as active as they want to be. Now, myself, I'm not looking for a more academic opportunity that's a lot of work. It's just too rigorous for where I'm at right now. So,
I
because
don't think
I'm
the
feeling the effects of
academic, yeah, it's not necessarily the academic solely. It,
it.
I think, is very much who is driving a lot of the need or a lot of the opportunity to provide experience, expertise, um, acknowledge the necessities. Um, and so typically that was community engagement,
Mhm.
but that lasts for a semester and then the student is gone off somewhere else. What is it that we can do to ingrain that within individuals? How can we develop co-generational community engagement? And that's where I think the expertise of the university in conjunction or in collaboration with the community becomes significant. Daniel?
Yeah, I love this conversation. And thinking of nature's examples, I'm reminded of trees and forests and how, as trees grow, the type 3 ecosystem, trees mature and they create a bunch of new ecosystems for life, right? From insects to birds to critters. And I had never seen that 5 stage life cycle before. So I really appreciate that that sounds like a practical way to think about how do we, as we get older, create new ecosystems, create new opportunities, not just for ourselves, but for other people. And then I don't know if this is the appropriate analogy, but I'll share it anyway. I think about the redwood trees, and when they die, they decompose for hundreds of years, and they create what are called nursery logs, right? Where their life is still giving, even though the tree itself has died. So I don't mean like how do people give after they die, but I'm thinking about like what is the nursery log analogy here in that later stage of life? Because as noted, the people who are, what did you say, 70% of the wealth is held by those who are older in the US. How does that wealth get redistributed and create new life, right? That regenerative.
Mhm.
I go back to adaptive cycle too, and I wonder if we can map that 5 stage life on the adaptive cycle.
Yeah.
mm.
Um, so really great questions and really good thinking, and I appreciate the way you're talking about this and researching it and finding examples where people are doing it well, and also noting that a lot of people, a lot of institutions aren't yet.
And I think the thing I think about a lot to continue with the trees is the fact that, as you know, and I'm sure others here do, they feed each other as needed through their root systems, which are
Hmm.
intertwined. They share water. So those nutrients are spread without us necessarily being aware of it. So, one of the things that I'm a graduate assistant in research and community engagement. And so one of the things I frequently talk about with my faculty advisor is um, I can't be an activist. I don't have the time at this point, but I can be an advocate on a campus like Coastal, which is so enormously successful with its undergraduates. And I believe that we need to reconsider closing out a College of Continuing Education. I believe strongly, and so Mary Ellen, of course, goes to the provost of the university and says, "Would you like to be on my dissertation committee?" And he, being the nice, naive fellow that he is, said, "Oh, yes, that would be wonderful." And I said, "Thank you. So I'll continue to send you my papers and projects so that you're aware of what I'm thinking about." I did. I did that 2 years ago, less than a month after he jumped into the position. But if you look at what UC San Diego is doing in their continuing education, and Georgia Tech and University of Wisconsin at Green Bay and University of Washington, they are just blowing up the concept of age segregated education, and they have high school programs going on right with at the same time and as a part of the older programs and the undergraduate programs. And Georgia Tech renamed its College of Continuing Education to the College of Lifetime Learning, and they are totally innovating a whole new three-pronged approach to working within the community, all the way down to retirement communities right next to the nursery schools, to ensure that there's an ongoing action and reaction happening between the nursery schools and these independent living. Mirabella at ASU, Arizona State University.
Sonia had her hand up too, just to call that
Oh,
out.
thank you. Good. I didn't see that. Go ahead, Sonia.
I don't want to interrupt you right in the middle of your sentence if you're
Well,
okay.
there are specific examples of places that I just love the idea of them saying, it's all of us, and how do we connect with each other, and how do we regeneratively express that it is a co-generational opportunity. So I'll stop so you have time.
Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate so much about this, Mary Ellen. I'm right behind you, right? I'm a perfect example of who you're talking about. I am in the last year of my 50th decade, so I'm looking 60 in the eye here in the next year.
It gets more fun, Sonia.
Right? It just gets better and better. I can't wait.
It does.
And so I think I'm a perfect example, right, of somebody who's exactly what you're talking about. Sort of came in under the radar, right in under the finish line, because I went back to school in my mid to late 40s, paid out the nose, right, for an education that got me maybe 10 years into my second career. And then, anyway, so that's one thing. I want to thank you because you're talking about people like me. And I'm looking at my little retirement nest eggs thinking, okay, it's going to have to last until I'm 100. I firmly believe that. I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
But what I also love about what you're saying is the resistance to the system of higher education, as I see it, right? You're talking about it comes both from the inside, meaning it's going to protect itself and continue to go back to the 25-year-olds or the 18 to 25, right? Because it doesn't want to change. So the resistance is both internal, as I hear you say it, and certainly external, right?
Absolutely.
The resistance external is, I don't want to participate in that. Why would I, right? Why would I? There's nothing there for me.
That's it.
And if I, in fact, am somebody who is creeping into the 60s and 70s, right? Because of the time that we're in and because of the intelligence that we now have access to, more and more people are on board with the natural systems thinking and the noticing in the Buddhist tradition, right? How incredibly we suffer every time we see ourselves as separate from anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so this life-sustaining model of learning and being in community, yes, is always the answer, also in the education system. And I think the resistance that I'm part of, that so many are seeing, is and I also live in Minnesota, right? Look at the resistance in Minnesota.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So, so our,
Amazing, right? So I just love watching the resistance, and I don't know that I have a question in here, but maybe my question is beyond our words and our vernacular around regenerativity and connectedness. What is it like to notice? I don't know what the unity or oneness, right? Going beyond the talk of separateness or separation, but what is oneness? How do we get to the conversation around what are natural systems when we in fact are not separate from it at all? At all. Like and I think a lot more people are waking up to the more spiritual aspect and connection to no, I don't have a relationship with nature. I am not in relationship with it. I am it.
that's it. And I have said
Right.
that so many times, Sonia. Our president is determined that he's going to buy 50 acres for even more undergraduate student housing. And I'm salivating saying, oh, please do, because that enrollment slope is going to start to happen. Even at Coastal. I mean, it's already obviously happening with college closings around the country and enrollments. But my point is, it's going to happen here. There's just no alternative. But that's good because then we can develop a retirement housing community in that undergraduate housing. And Mary Ellen will be first in line to say, excuse me, you know those empty buildings that you're wondering what to do with? Let me help you. And I have the idea because you can charge all kinds of money for this, and then we can actually make sense out of having built these buildings. And let's live together. We talk about co-ed dorms that we've had for 1,000 years. Why can't we talk about multi-generational, co-generational housing?
You
Yeah.
just flipped the
Okay.
narrative on its head, and I'm going to give it to you, Kathy, to wrap things up.
Okay. So
I love it.
we need to wrap up because we're 2 minutes from the top of the hour. So I wanted to so one of my linkages connections to close this out is that in nature, evolution is driven by information and feedback. So this whole regenerative lens into our own human development is a way that we can really anchor um, and anchor ourselves in a regenerative practice is through the way we learn, the way we share information, the way we look for and nourish feedback loops for ourselves. So this is a huge topic, but it can be scaled and start with us and anchor us that way. So first of all, thank you so much, Mary Ellen, for bringing these fun and stimulating ideas to us today. And we will do another quarterly call on July 21st at same time, 1 p.m. Central Time. We don't really know exactly what the topic is just yet, but there are a number of interesting people out there that I think we can tap. I had as I went to the Northern Michigan University recently for a 3-day conference, and one of the speakers that I'm going to reach out to spoke about the politics of rest as one
Politics of what?
rest. Rest.
Oh,
The topic was on rest and resilience, for example. But also, I'm working with an international organization that's doing some really extraordinary things around regenerative organizational leadership and design. And so I'm going to reach out to them also to see if they might be interested in sharing what they're learning on their journey.
I
So
have
those
one
are some
more thought.
possibilities. Uh-huh.
Kathy, I'm happy if this group would like um, the topic of my dissertation, as I said, or the focus is on the social, psychological, and emotional development of later adults. And if this group would like to help me with that, since that's a little to not explored at all topic, I would be happy to offer another session for discussion because I think that's a definitely a regenerative process. I've done a pilot study, and in the conversations with people, it's been absolutely wonderful to listen to people's perspective on what that means, what it looks like, how they're going about it, what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. And we'll see each other in 3 months. Great to see all
Thank
of
you.
you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Kathy.